episode 2 of Sips and Dad Tips, and we are focusing on warmth today. So we are sipping on a warm glass of tea. Something that, I don't know, I guess is pretty comforting. And I remember when I was a kid, my mum would make me a cup of tea when I was feeling sick and, had a sore throat, bit of tea and honey, and that was her remedy for feeling better. And it's kind of like a warm hug, makes you feel nice, safe, secure. And that's something I want to touch on with kids in this episode, is making sure that they feel warmth with you. And I think that can be hard for some people, some dads, because it's sort of like it's almost sometimes showing a vulnerable side you might not be used to. And I know it might be a bit more of a generational thing, and I feel like maybe people growing up these days are more accustomed to having a sensitive side in their parenting, their fatherhood, that they might not have been used to when they were a kid from their father. But it's definitely something that's grown in, I guess the mainstream is to feel that it's okay to show a bit of warmth and affection and a softer side as a dad. And it's very much championed as being part of the all-round package, something every man should and can offer their kids. But just quickly before we do get started, if you would like to support the podcast at all, just a simple like, a sharing of the episode, a comment will mean the absolute world to me. It can really help the algorithm a lot. If you do want to give a bit of extra support, there is a donation page on the website, links in the description. Definitely not required, very much appreciated if you do though. But just having your general comments and feedback in the Google form in the description, or through DMs, messages, and in the comments, just any feedback, any bits of information you wanted to add or you wanted me to talk about, that would be huge. Anything like that, amazing. I suppose my generation growing up, and I'm 36, so growing up in the 90s, it was probably towards the tail end of having defined gender roles at home. I feel like these days it's very easy to it's very mixed and matched, and everyone is more comfortable with doing all kinds of different things. But I think if you have to look back to learn about the future and where a lot of us have come from, previous generations, and those generations have influenced us today. It's coming from traditional roles where, the father would go out and work and earn a living and provide for his family. The mother would stay at home and care for the kids and pick them up from school and clean up the house. And obviously that's changed. Everyone can do everything. And I guess in the 90s, it wasn't as traditional, so to speak. It was evolving, where my mum went to work, my dad would provide for us, but also come home, and he would love spending time with us on the weekends whenever he could. And I remember my dad pretty much took me to every single sports game that there was that I played when I was a kid. I guess that was his way of trying to spend more time with us, because he did work very hard, long hours to try and support us. And my mum was definitely more of a warm, affectionate type. Maybe as we grew up, I think it might have been harder to show the same affection for younger kids as teenagers. From a teenager's point of view, you kind of push away and you want to spend less time with your parents in a different way, and you want them to treat you like an adult, and you're not a kid anymore. And there's probably a lot of hesitation from parents. I haven't got there yet. My oldest is 8 years old, and he isn't quite pulling away from us yet in terms of affection and everything. And I think I've tried my very hardest to keep warmth and affection with him through hugs and kisses every day, in the mornings, when I come home from work, when I put him down to bed, whatever it might be. But I think there's different kinds of warmth, and I think all types are important for kids growing up, especially these days where, there's a lot of screens. Kids are finding it harder to have that one-on-one time with friends. They're separated by technology and might not get that same sort of face-to-face time that a lot of us did back in the day growing up in earlier times where there were no screens. You had to learn how to talk to someone face-to-face. So traditionally, it would have been that whenever you were sick, your mother would take care of you and care for you and be an affectionate sort of influence on you and make you feel warm and safe. And for me, it was like my dad was happy to be the one that maybe we feared more, just to try and keep us more disciplined in a way. Like there was always a threat, wait till your father gets home. And like all he would have to do most of the time is just glare at us and we would fall back in line. There always was a threat of a smack or, a yelling, but he even said, as we're older and now that we're parents, he always said that sometimes you have to just be okay with being the bad guy to keep a bit of discipline, because it's not about, it might hurt you as a parent to yell or tell your kids off when you really just want to hug them. And I suppose maybe there was a difficulty in being able to do both. And obviously not everyone is perfect, but I tried to learn from that and those lessons that he's taught me. And I try and be a bit more affectionate, even though I do try and be the one who can be the disciplinarian if it needs to be that way. But luckily, I think either we've done a fairly decent job so far, but we don't have kids that run crazy rampant, and there's not a lot to do to tell them off about. It's we've tried to do more of the talking to, and for the most part they are very reasonable kids, where it doesn't take much to get them to listen or to get them to understand where we're coming from. But one of the ways that I think is important to show, firstly, we kind of almost need to define what warmth is, and I looked this up to try and get the right words for it. I found this definition: expressing positive affection and support through physical contact like hugs, smiling, using a gentle tone of voice, actively listening to their concerns, praising their efforts, showing interest in their activities, and generally creating a safe and welcoming environment where they feel valued and cared for. So finding that balance of how to show warmth as you're learning to be a parent as well can sometimes be difficult if you're also trying to be strict in some ways and making sure that they can listen to you if they're doing something wrong. And then our busy lives these days, we're multitasking, we're working, picking them up from school, coming home, trying to organize all the stuff. Households can get crazy busy, and stress can run high sometimes, and it can be hard to remember that these are just young developing humans that they don't quite understand yet what it's like to know that they are loved without potentially having that message reinforced every single day in every single way. And so one of our kids is it's surprisingly good at expressing himself, not with his words to us directly, but he will write us the sweetest notes about sometimes how he can't explain with his words to us how he really feels, but then he can write us a note and explain that way. And it's almost heartbreaking sometimes how the smallest thing can make a kid feel like they're not appreciated as much as they very much are. One of the small details of this, like an example of one of these tiny details to us as adults that we might forget, kids find important. Our son was a little bit upset because while we both always say goodnight to our kids and we give them a kiss and a hug, one will set one down, one will sit down the other in bed and give them another little kiss and cuddle in bed, and then that's it. He was a bit upset because one of us didn't kiss him in bed that night, and he had some big feelings about that he didn't feel loved, which kind of hurt us because he very much is. And it was just one of those things where it's a detail where we kissed him goodnight maybe 2 minutes before he went to bed, but it's just that extra little something that he obviously hangs on to, and as a kid it's their world, it's very important, and it can be easy to forget. And so why making a kid feel like they're valued and cared for? Obviously, I mean, it sounds like an obvious thing that's important, but the sensation of comfort and feeling that appreciation releases hormones in your body. So it's not just, logic. It's sometimes, most of the time, illogical to us why, certain things need to be done, but our body responds to things in different ways. So another way that I think maybe as guys sometimes it can be hard to maybe show affection if you've never experienced that as a kid yourself. You might have come through a difficult childhood, or your father didn't have that side of him in him to be able to express it, either by fear or just the way he was raised, and it's sort of like breaking the cycle now when it's your turn as a parent. One of the things that comes naturally to a lot of people but might not to some is rough and tumble play. So physical contact, tickling your kids and like pinning them down, wrestling with them a little bit, and they can get a lot out of that. It teaches kids a lot of things. I read somewhere it helps them regulate their emotions, and they kind of learn their limits and sometimes how to push past what they think their limit is. So if they suddenly feel like they're being overpowered while you're wrestling them and they can't quite get out of a grip or a hold that you have on them, but they can find a way. It's sort of like a learning experience for them through physicality, where it's we get caught up sometimes thinking the only thing our kids learn is through teachings at school or lessons that we talk to them about, but obviously there are other ways that humans learn, and through their hands and through physical experiences we can learn a lot. So sometimes rough and tumble play is something that's very important. It gets kids thinking about how to get out of risky situations, but also they enjoy that that playtime, that physical contact. It's closeness to the parents, and so that's something I think we can all be wary of. And one thing that I was wary of was is trying to put my phone down and being present in a lot of the times that it might be a quiet evening, a quiet afternoon, and we might be watching TV, or the kids are off playing somewhere, and we'll pick up our phone and we'll start scrolling, and the kids will come in, and even if they're not looking for attention, just them watching you scrolling your phone, what kind of influence is that? And that's not something that I'm not happy about, and it can be a very hard habit to break. But it is something I'm wary of, because even if you think you can multitask, you probably can't. And whilst we think we're good communicators, even while we're reading emails or we're scrolling on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and our kid will ask us a question and we'll reply, are we giving them the the eye contact? Are we giving them the facial expressions to feel, that warmth, that we're there for them, present, and it's, to us, we might think, well, we're just, we're there, we're answering their questions, we look at them, but is it really that way for them? Because the little things do matter. So for my personal experiences as well, probably learned a bit later in my 20s as well, in my late teens, 20s, that I was probably, my love language is physical contact and affection. So I love hugging my kids. I'll hug them whenever I can. I'll give them a kiss on the head, brush their head as they walk past and mess up their hair a little bit and make sure they know I'm there. And that's just what I'm like. I'm like that with wifey. Whenever we walk past each other, I, have to make physical contact. That's just how I am. So for me, showing warmth in that way is a lot more natural than maybe my father had felt when he was my age, going through the same things, and now me understanding what it's like as a parent, you kind of appreciate, parents will probably generally do the best job that they know how. And, maybe he didn't know how to show the same things that I know how to show, but then he was better at doing other things than what I am. So, but that was a very important thing that I wanted to keep up with my kids, was that warmth, not making them feel like I'm there for them. It's funny how the kids have different personalities. So my eldest was a terrible sleeper, and one of my biggest regrets was the first time that it was just me and him, and he was a baby, like a very small, a few weeks old, a few months, when wifey she was confident enough to go have a night off and go out for dinner or something. And it was all on me to do the feed and setting down. And like, I'd done that plenty of times when we were together, but this one night when she took off, and it was just a hard night, I was sleep deprived, and I was trying to comfort him, and nothing was working. And it was just one of those times where I was just so frustrated. And I remember being on the floor next to his cot and just like screaming at myself, like, what is wrong? Why can't I get him to sleep? Like, what's wrong with me? And I like, there's that part of me that thinks that there's something in him that remembers me yelling at him or in his general direction, and that as a kid getting older, he doesn't know what it is, but he maybe fears me in some way, but he's not naturally an affectionate kid. He won't really go up and hug you for no reason. And when he does, when you do ask for a hug and you go do it, he's a little bit awkward in it. It's not really what he does. Whereas my youngest will come up and will just kiss and hug, and he's very affectionate in that way, like opposites. And part of me wonders if the experience of when it's so funny, like, you think as a baby they don't remember things and like it doesn't matter, but maybe it does. When he was born, very, very shortly after he was born, wifey had to be taken away for some emergency surgery, and I mean, she was gone for a few hours. We had no idea what was going on. So it was my job to do the skin on skin, cuddles, the first feed, with a little bit of the milk that we had saved up, the early colostrum. And so it was just me and him, and I was trying to be calm and let him feel my breathing, my heartbeat. And that makes me wonder if that closeness that we shared at the very start is something that is a bit more natural to him, and getting that from me, like, how you say babies can, they can smell their parents and their mother and where to go, and what's familiar to them is, all their other senses, because they can't even really see. So it makes me wonder if those sorts of experiences have shaped my kids both positively and negatively. And that's, you know, parental regret, I guess. It's just things we hang on to that we make ourselves feel guilty for. Or is it just that's the natural way that they express themselves, and, you know, nothing would have changed that if those experiences were different, they would still be the same? Who knows? I wish I had all the answers, and it would be nice if somebody else did and would be able to share them, but I don't think anyone does. And it's probably all part of the learning experience that we all endure. And if you've made it this far, I'd love to hear what you have to say on the topic of, you know, showing warmth to your kids and affection and things like that. In the description, there will be a link for a Google form if you want to submit any questions or talking points. You can reach me via email, which is also in the description, and links to all my socials. You can DM me at any time about anything at all. And yeah, I'd love to take your advice, your insights, anything you might like to add to any of these episodes, and potentially go through them on episode 3 of Sips and Dad Tips. My name is Mingers, and thank you so much for being here through episode 2, and I will catch you next week.